not have had some connection and some training and therefore the ability to do quite a lot of damage. Obviously.
Of course, French intelligence, I understand, is saying that he also went to Syria as well. So there is, he could have been, we don't know if he was trained in Libya. We don't know what the connections of his father was. There's been some reports. He fell out with the Gaddafi regime and left. That's why they ended up in Britain. We'll come on to that later in the programme too about him. But I want to ask you, so the Home Secretary said this morning that Salman Abedi, the suicide bomber, was known to the security services, quote, up to a point. What does that mean?
I think it probably means that he may have had contact with somebody who was on a watch list or who even may have been watched. Constantly, the security service and counter-terrorism command must make pretty tough judgments every day.
Indeed.
About going and asking for resources, as we've just discussed. If you want to monitor somebody, especially in the current era, the current climate of end-to-end encryption, we know that the attacker in Westminster was WhatsApping just before he drove his car across Westminster Bridge. Still, I don't believe, it's not in the public domain, but I don't believe we've got those messages yet. There's an ongoing discussion with the company behind that technology. The question is, do these people have the ability to be ahead of the security services, even with all the sophistication that we've got to bring?
Well, in this case, sadly, they did.
And although this is a terrible, tragic event, it doesn't necessarily indicate, I must say, an intelligence and security. Well, it's a failure of our counter-terrorism efforts that anybody ever gets through, but it's not necessarily a failure of intelligence. We don't want to go to, and I know it's a general point, but in East Germany, more than 50% of the population were informing on the other 48%, and there is that balance between over-securitizing our lives and therefore achieving what conventionally we say we don't want to, which is changing our normal life.
There were some reports that Abedi had links with this called the Libyan Islamic Fighting Group in the Manchester area. Indeed, that they were in Whaley Range, which is not far from where he lived in the Manchester area, the LIFG. That they had raised funds and that they'd even been connected tangentially with the Disbury Mosque. We don't know that, but that's what some reports say. But it's been described, this LIFG, the Lesbian Islamic Fighting Group, in that area in Manchester, as a hotbed for Islamic State. People will be watching this, will be surprised that we know of hotbeds of Islamic State in this country and don't seem to have done much about it.
Well, absolutely. And certainly at this point, I mean, I think 10 years ago, I don't think anyone would have been that surprised that we had these groups operating with what was going on in society at the time. I think since the Islamic State has started acting as it has in Libya and has committed all these terrorist attacks, I would hope that we've got a little bit more information about them to deal with them.
Let me just ask you one final in broad terms. We've been through this before, and the French have been through it even more times in recent years as well. Does anything change as a result of this?
Well, we are stopping most attacks, but the truth is terrorism is not stopped by security services. Individual acts of terrorism are, and they're very important. We ultimately have to go through the community and the policy of countering what you may call countering violent extremism or countering extremism generally. That's the long term. But the resources don't go into that. The resources go into physical security and intelligence agencies.
But we say this every time, that we have to do this after an attack. And yet 22 people were killed and almost 60 badly injured in Manchester again.
It's about the hardest policy area you can have. It's about education, it's about community cohesion and determined people in other countries planning attacks against us. I think no country has found an answer to this. And more importantly, it's a dynamic problem. The mobilization of people going to Syria and Libya were different people to the 2,000 we were looking at a decade ago from Al-Qaeda. Some were the same, some have moved over, but essentially it is a very dramatic problem, also for countries like France.
Professor Grierson, thank you for being with us. Welcome. Now, leaders around the world have been quick to declare their solidarity with the UK following the attack. Here's Ellie with a summary of how the world responded.
In Paris, the lights turned off as a mark of respect. In New York, the Empire State Building, a skyline dimmed. And in Dubai, Geneva, Zagreb and Belfast too. The international gestures matched with words of solidarity from world leaders and contempt for the terrorists.
I will call them from now on losers, because that's what they are. They're losers.
After phoning Theresa May, the French president walked to the British embassy to sign a book of condolence. In Berlin, Chancellor Merkel said Germany stood shoulder to shoulder with Britain.
Deutschland steht an ihrer Seite.
Other world leaders took to social media to send their support to Britain, while President Putin sent a telegram to the Prime Minister offering to increase counter-terrorism cooperation. Like many European capitals, the EU flew its flags at half-mast in Brussels. And in Australia, Prime Minister Turnbull captured the mood of many.
This is a direct and brutal attack on young people everywhere, on freedom everywhere.
Ariana Grande, the American singer whose concert it was in Manchester, has flown home, but not yet cancelled her London tour dates later this week. Meanwhile, many other musicians tweeted their thoughts, including Rihanna, who said Manchester was close to her heart and suggested the attack could have happened at one of her concerts. And the Oasis singer and celebrated Mancunian Liam Gallagher, who tweeted that he sent love and light to all the families involved. The world of sport paid tribute too. Manchester United held a minute's silence at their training session ahead of the Europa League Cup final in Stockholm tonight. One of their most famous former players, David Beckham, captured the mood with this tweet.
Ellie Price reporting there. Now, police in Manchester say 3 more arrests have been made this morning in connection with the attack. One man detained yesterday is still in custody. Catriona Renton is our correspondent. She's outside the Greater Manchester Police area. Let's go to her. Catriona, what can you tell us about the 3 arrests this morning?
Well, first of all, there's been a number of developments today, Andrew, and just to keep you up to date on that, the 3 men who were arrested this morning were arrested in South Manchester. Police had been issued with warrants. Now, we understand, of course, that they have been arrested in connection with this investigation. Another development, the 23-year-old man who was arrested yesterday, well, we can now confirm that he is the brother of 22-year-old Salman Abedi, who, of course, was the bomber that was identified yesterday. And let me bring you another statement from Greater Manchester Police, which has come in within the last half hour. They can say now that they are confident that they know who all of the people are who sadly lost their lives at the Manchester Arena. They say they've made contact with all of the families who are being supported by specialist officers, and they say that due to the number of victims, post-mortems are due to take 4 to 5 days, and then they will be in a position with the guidance of the coroner to be able to formally name the victims. Now, this investigation is very fast moving, of course. We've seen the developments that we've already talked about. The Home Secretary Amber Rudd said this morning that Salman Abedi was known to intelligence services up to a point. Now, that leaves, of course, a big question as to what extent was he known to intelligence services. We understand that he's been recently come back from Libya. Of course, he would have had his passport checked by the security services when he came back into the UK. And of course, we've also heard that he may have been known to American intelligence services also. Now, this investigation, the central point to it now is, was Salman Abedi acting alone? Police want to know this. This is their main priority, is to find out who, if anyone else, was involved and to track them down. Now, they say we understand that they need to know where the bomb was made, if there were other people involved perhaps in the design of the bomb, the making of the bomb, the armouring of the bomb, and if maybe there were others who were encouraging Salman Abedi and supporting him before he carried out that horrific attack on Monday night. Now, as I said, the police investigation here is fast moving, police working hard with the counter-terrorism network, and they have also thanked the people of Manchester, thanked them for their strength and their resilience over the past few days, and they say that they will need to carry on with this strength and resilience while they ensure that they can make this city safe once again.
All right, Catriona Renton outside the Greater Manchester Police building. Thank you for joining us there. Let's stay in Manchester now and go to Lucy Powell, an MP in the Manchester area. Lucy Powell, welcome to the programme. In your experience or knowledge, how serious is the problem of Islamist radicalisation in Manchester?
Well, I'm not sure that this is the right moment to totally go into that, because I don't even want to ascribe what has happened to the Islam faith, because most of my constituents who are Muslim would absolutely disassociate themselves from any act of violence or terror like this. And so, you know, I think we've got to be careful of that.
But I'm not ascribing it to them. I didn't say Islam, I said Islamist, which of course is different. And we learned that there are areas regarded as hotbeds of Islamic State in the Manchester area. Were you aware of that? Is that common knowledge in the city?
It's I think sometimes these things are given labels, areas. You know, certainly there was a media report recently about Moss Side, an area that I represent, as though that was somehow a hotbed of Islamic extremists. And actually, most of the evidence that was used in that article just did not stack up, because people were from you know, far and wide across the Greater Manchester area, and the people that they were using to create that story, you know, weren't there at the same time as one another. So I think we have to be very sort of careful, especially in these times, to start pitting community against community, about saying that certain areas or certain people or certain communities are somehow you know, responsible when they are not. These are the acts of deranged individuals who have, in my eyes, have nothing to do with humanity at all. How anyone who is a human being could possibly carry out these acts, I find incomprehensible. So I think it's really important, in the face of these sorts of atrocities and this horrific terror attack in Manchester, that we don't start pointing the finger in the wrong place and pitting community against community.
None of the questions I'm asking you involve pointing the finger at anybody. They're trying to get to the bottom of how this happened and who was behind it.
Absolutely.
Is there a realisation, is that the feeling in Manchester, that Abedi was not acting alone, that there is a cell, a group of people who have helped him to do this, therefore making the situation all the more dangerous?
Well, that's what we are hearing, and obviously I'm not in a position to provide a commentary, and nor would I provide a running commentary on the operation that is underway, and trying to make sure that everybody associated with this heinous crime is found and brought to justice. And of course, when somebody does carry out an act like this, in a sense, it does break open that cell or that network that has hitherto remained under the radar of the security services. So inevitably there will, and I hope that they close all the associates down completely and identify them all and make sure they are brought to justice. But it is an ongoing investigation. But I do not recognise the description of areas of Manchester, parts of Manchester, being hotbeds of radicalisation at all.
All right, Lucy Powell in Manchester, thank you for joining us there. Now, police have named this 22-year-old Salman Abedi as the person suspected of carrying out the suicide attack at the Manchester Arena on Monday evening. So what do we know about him, and how did he become radicalised? We're joined now by our security correspondent, Gordon Carrera. Gordon, we know he's one of 4 children of Libyan migrants who had fled Gaddafi. He was a Manchester United supporter. He liked cricket. He had smoked cannabis. He made it to Salford University. He wasn't from a deprived background or anything like that. His father had fled the Gaddafi regime, we think, at one stage, but is now back in Tripoli. What